Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk about analysing your photographs. So this is a huge topic and I will definitely make sort of a little series of videos on this one. But today I thought I would just start out with a little introduction. So I've created a little worksheet and, ooh, the light's changing. Sorry about that. The sun keeps going behind clouds, so it's gonna look really weird. So I've created a little worksheet and it has a few things on it that you might want to look at when you're analysing your photographs. So I'm going to put a link in the description box to the worksheet so that you can download it and use it for yourself. It'll be free and hopefully it'll help you in looking at your photos in a more careful, analytical way. Before I get started, if you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos, including more of these photography videos. Okay, so to get started, if you print out the worksheet or just write it out yourself if you prefer, the first thing to look at is the subject. So this is the main person in the photo. That may just be one of your relatives, or you might not know who the subject is. It might actually be a photo in your collection that you can't identify. These are often historic photos, maybe they've been passed down and it's been forgotten who the person is. So if you can identify the subject, identify them. All right, the next thing is their relationship to me, or to you, as it were. So if you know who the person is, maybe you're also aware of how they're related to you. Maybe not. It may be something that you'll want to look into as we progress, but it's something to note if you already know it. All right, so the next thing is the type of photograph. So there are many different types of photographs, and in this video, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about all of the different kinds. So maybe this will help you to identify what type of photograph you have in your collection. The first kind is the Daguerreotype. I hope I'm saying that correctly. By the way, if I say any of these words wrong, I'm sorry. Most of them I've only ever seen written. I'm not sure about some of the pronunciations. So Daguerreotype. These ones were first produced in Europe in 1839 and they hung around for about 20 years. So the photos have a mirror-like kind of silvery finish on them, and something else that they have is the image will be reversed. So for example, if you've got a married person, it might look like their wedding ring is on their right hand. So it'll be a flip sort of reverse image. These were pretty expensive to buy. So for the most part, you'll only find them amongst wealthier classes. In Australia, they cost $1 to have one. And that's basically a week's worth of wages for a labourer. So you wouldn't have had too many of them in the working classes. And then the photo was inserted into a frame which was made out of wood, or it could have been like a case made out of wood and covered in like velvet or leather or like paper mache type thing. Also, each photo, there was only ever one copy of it. So this process didn't make multiple copies. So you're only ever going to have one original, like unless they've been re-scanned in modern times, but there would only be one copy if it was this type. And by 1860, they just didn't exist anymore. All right, the next type is the Amberotype. This was made most commonly in the 1850s and 1860s, but they existed all the way up until the 1880s. They were similar to the Daguerreotype in their size and the mounting, but it wasn't a reversed image, it was right way up. They have a characteristic grayish type appearance, and they were a lot cheaper as well, so they were more accessible to more people. Right, the third sort is the carte de visite. Sorry about the pronunciation. These are the most common type of photographs that were found in the 1800s. They became available in 1860 and continued to be produced up until the 1880s, but they were most popular in the 1860s. The photo was typically 2.5 by 4.8 inches in size. It was mounted, so that size includes sort of the mounting. It had a sepia tone, and often the photographer's name and maybe address was printed on the back of the card or sometimes on the front. One thing to be careful of with these is sometimes the photographer's name was also handwritten. So you may have one of these in your collection and assume that the handwritten name is the subject of the photo, but sometimes it was actually the photographer's name, so beware of this. Most photographers took full-length portraits at this time, however some of them were just head and shoulder pictures. There is some variation in the years, so sometimes you can actually date the photo a little bit more specifically just by some variations within the photo. So for example, in the 1860s, they were printed on a thinner kind of poorer quality paper, and a lot of them show signs of like rust, which is sort of deterioration because of the acid in the paper. They also had square corners, and sometimes they looked a bit rough around the edges because they'd been cut by scissors back then. So in the 1870s, the paper was a bit thicker and better quality, and some of them had a bit of a pastel kind of finish on them, and very frequently they had a coloured border around the edge as well. In 1875, they used a enameling to create like a high gloss finish, and in the 1880s they had like pastel finishes, like a glaze over it, sometimes a cream or a pink colour. And some of them were also embossed so that the figure was sort of raised a little bit. So some of those slight differences you can sometimes sort of pinpoint which year it was just based on some of the advances in the technology. The sun is totally in my eyes now. Anyway, soldiering on. The fourth type is the tintype photo. So the tintypes were around between 1852 and 1900. They were really cheap to make and buy, so they were prevalent. They were often done by sort of itinerant photographers and people at like fairs and carnivals and things like that. Sometimes they made really tiny sort of ones that would be put into jewelry or into a card or something like that. Typically they were 2.5 by 4 inches or sometimes 10 by 4 inches, but they never tended to be bigger than that. Sorry, they were sometimes bigger than that, but rarely bigger than that. The tintypes have a characteristic black kind of appearance to them. Number 5 is the Centertype, which was popular in Australia between 1863 and 1865, which is a tiny window. So I couldn't find a hell of a lot of information on the Centertype, except that it was made by 2 albumen prints being sandwiched together, and the top print was waxed, so it gave it a transparent kind of surface, and sometimes they were hand colored as well to give a bit of a 3D effect. Anyway, they're probably pretty rare. All right, number 6 is the cabinet photo. This one came in because of demand for larger photos, so it was similar to the carte de visite but a bit bigger. They're about 4.5 by 6.5 inches. In the early days, which is sort of 1866 when they first arrived, they were a bit more expensive, but they became cheaper as time went on, and by the 1880s they were relatively affordable. They sometimes had coloured mounts, so sometimes maroon or green. That was most common in the 1880s and 1890s. All right, number 7, the panel. That was available between 1875 and 1920. They were even larger at around 8.5 by 6.5 inches. They were meant to capture sort of families or bigger groups of people. Number 8, the Opalotype. I don't know how to say that. These were sometimes called milk glass, and they were sort of a milky kind of finish. Sometimes they were also hand tinted with colors, which gave them sort of a watercolor pastel type effect. These were also available between 1875 and 1920. Number 9, the snapshot. So obviously demand for amateur photographers to be able to take their own photos. Eventually this became available, and in 1888 the first Kodak camera was available. It was pretty expensive at the time, but by the sort of First World War there was a real boom, and a lot of people were buying cameras to take photos of soldiers, and a lot of soldiers were buying cameras to take photos when they went off to war. There was another boom in the Second World War, and as we are today, like snapshots are a hugely common sort of form of photograph. All right, and lastly, postcard photos. So these were popular between 1905 and 1940. So Empire and Kodak Austral were 2 popular brands of postcard stationery, and the layout sort of varied over the years, but they were hugely popular at the time. So sometimes the photographer's name would be printed on the back, but also DIY kind of postcard cameras came out. These are kind of easier to identify because they're usually poorer quality than you're going to get from a professional photographer, but super interesting. Alright, so that is all the different types of photos that you're likely to come across. So moving on through the worksheet, we just go to the next section. Who are the people in the photo? So try to name as many of the people as possible. This is only different to subject, because subject, we put the main person in the photo. So more likely it's the main person who is connected with us. But now list everyone who's in the photo, at least if you can. And now the date for the photo, if you know it, and then the source for the date. So is the date written on the photograph? Is it written in an album? Have you dated it through one of the sort of methods that I just talked about, looking at the type of photograph? Have you dated it by maybe the age of the people who are in the photo, that you know roughly how old they would have been then? There's lots of ways that you may want to date the photo, but definitely put your source for how you came to that date. And lastly, where was it taken? So maybe it's labeled, maybe you recognize the place, maybe it was a house that was in the family, or you know, a holiday spot that people went to, or whatever it was. Try to find the location if you can. And then I've just put a little section at the bottom for discussion for anything else that you might want to add. So hopefully you'll enjoy analyzing some of your photos this way. Like, I think that it helps because it makes you look at your photos in a much more sort of in-depth way and get a little bit more out of them than maybe just when you glance at them in an album and you don't think too hard about them. So like I said, I'll put a link below to download that worksheet, but otherwise you can just write those things out for yourself if you prefer. And yeah, so if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on my future videos. And I hope that you're having a great day and good luck with your research. And I will see you soon in my next video. Bye!